Welcome to On Character Development, Part 2 of 2. Last session, we talked about some basics on how to start brainstorming a character. And then if you were in my online course, we also did some brainstorming and created a class character. Today, we're going to go to the next level and talk about the meat of what makes a character realistic and compelling for the reader. We're going to rely heavily on a book called Wired for Story by Lisa Crone. I've talked to her about her a lot. This book is one of the best books that I've read about writing because what she looks at is the way our brain is wired to hear story, and that's sort of anthropological in basis. And then if you understand how the reader and the human is wired to receive story, it makes you a better storyteller because you're presenting it in a way that the reader's mind is ready to receive it. Let's get started. The first thing we need to know, there's three things. What is the character's goal? What is their motivation or their why? And then what is at conflict? And we're going to talk about the character's goal first. In Wired for Story, Lisa Crone says, a protagonist without a clear goal has nothing to figure out and nowhere to go. And if you've ever read a story like that, it is very unsatisfying. Everyone has an agenda, which is another term for goal, and your character, even your minor character, should have a goal. We're wired with something called mirror neurons, which help us to experience something as if it was happening to us in real time. So that means we're mirroring fictional characters. When we read, we are experiencing internal what the character is experiencing on the page. In fact, MRI studies, they do functional MRIs, and that when somebody is reading, their brain fires as if they were experiencing it. So if the character is in a scary situation, your physical body and your brain are responding in the same way. We slip into the protagonist's skin, and we need to know the character's goal so that we know how to feel. And then the obstacles that are in the story, the one we create or the one we're reading, that's what keeps us from getting the goal. We don't want to make it too easy for the character. Everyone has a goal. The protagonist acts and reacts to the plot based on his or her goal. There are two types of goals, internal goals and external goals. The internal goals tend to originate out of the character, and external goals frequently come from the plot. That isn't to say they're always that way, but that tends to be the norm. Often the thing keeping us from our external goal is our internal struggle. There's an emotional cost for achieving a goal. The reader is there for the internal struggle, even if it's an action thriller. It's the conflict with the internal that keeps the reader on edge. So in Die Hard, John McClane, and if you haven't watched Die Hard, it's one of the best Christmas movies. Oh, I just realized today, 2 Christmas movies we're talking about. Okay, back to the plan. In Die Hard, John McClane is fighting terrorists, but his internal goal is to win back his wife, which complicates the plot. If you think about that movie, he's there to get back with his wife, then terrorists take over her place of business, and the only reason that he cares, maybe, other than the fact that he's a cop, is that he needs to save his wife. And so that complicates the external goal. Without a goal, the events in the plot are random. Goal provides context, goal provides progress, and goal creates meaning. So if there's just terrorists taking over a tower and we see it externally without that internal conflict of his wife being in the room, there's zero context. Why is he there? Why does he care? Why do we care? It provides progress because as the plot goes along, the external plot with the terrorist goes along, the terrorists are trying to figure out how he is connected to that building. And that's what creates meaning, because the closer they get to figuring out that his wife is there, the more danger he and the wife are in. The anticipation of that is what hooks the reader. We don't know what to anticipate if the character has no goals. We wouldn't know to be nervous every time the camera pans across Holly. The only reason that it matters is because that's John McClane's wife. The story should dig deeper into the internal struggle. Why hasn't the protagonist achieved their goal yet? In books, the answer to that question is she did this because, and the because matters, right? The because is the motivation, the why. In life, she did this, no explanation. I mean, that's true. People, like, if you've ever seen weird random things, I was driving down a major road in Colorado Springs one day, and it's 3 lanes on one side, a median, and then 3 lanes on the other side. And out of nowhere, this woman jumps out of a car and starts walking through traffic, and we're all going about 50 miles an hour. We have no idea what her why was. She just did it, and there was no explanation. We read books to discover the why. Why the character wants something, why or what it means to that character, what getting it or losing it will cost the character. The whole point of story is the why. Humans use story to explain the why. Stories help us to navigate the dangerous world around us. That's actually the purpose of story. Isn't just to entertain, it's actually to teach ourselves how to handle situations in real life. So the second thing that you need to be concerned about for this particular element is, what is the character's motivation? A book isn't just about what happens. It's about how the things that happen affect the protagonist. It matters that you have the why it matters, or how it affects the protagonist or the other characters. So for an example of why this matters, and I don't know where this originated, if this was, well, who knows where this originated, but there's the idea that the king died and the queen died. That's just what happened. Story is the king died and the queen died of grief. The difference between those two bullets is the motivation, or the why. We're going to use our example for this is also from Wired for Story, but she also has a blog, and if you like what we're discussing here, Lisa Krone's blog is a great place full of learning information in it, and she breaks down It's a Wonderful Life. So that's the second movie we're going to use as an example. And the story question, the plot question is, will George Bailey kill himself at exactly 10:45 p.m. on Christmas Eve? That's what we start out thinking the story is about. The internal question is, why is he considering, or why is he discouraged enough to consider suicide? And there's 2 angels who are helping him, and the more experienced angel says to the other, if you're going to help a man, you want to know something about him, don't you? And that becomes almost guidance for us as writers, because we need to know enough about the character to care enough about them. So is the story question, will George leave town to follow his dream? So if you don't know about It's a Wonderful Life, you should watch it. It plays every Christmas a million times. And the external question is he going to kill himself, right? But that's not really what the movie is about. The internal question is the discouragement that he's going through that would lead him to think that was his only option. And we don't know yet. This is one of those stories that starts there, and then we have sort of a series of flashbacks to get to the answer to that. In order to create a plot that helps open your protagonist's eyes to what's right there in front of him, you need to know something about the protagonist first. And that's really what the angel character is telling us. So the defining moments that happen after this, as the character keeps going back in the past, almost a little bit like Ebenezer Scrooge with the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. We see these moments from George's past that are defining moments that create his current situation. So if you ever have a story that has flashbacks, what you're flashing back to has to directly relate to their current situation. The real question, the one that has us hooked, isn't the external question. So the external question is, why didn't George leave? Or let me go back. So the story question, the external part is, will George leave town to follow his dream? That's the external plot. And if, as you go along, you see all the reasons that he doesn't get to leave. He's wanted from the time he graduated, he's just wanted to leave Bedford Falls. So the real question is, why didn't George leave? And this is his internal motivation that keeps him there. And that's the element that keeps the reader engaged, or in this case, the viewer engaged. And the answer is, it's his integrity and being there for others who depended on him that kept him at Bedford Falls. That is what gave him meaning, and it was ultimately more important than following his dreams. In other words, it cost him his external dream of leaving town to find his internal dream of being mattering to people. And then Crone finishes up her blog post with the phrase, George Bailey did achieve his dream, even if it took a dark night of the soul for him to realize it. And his real dream was being able to help people and to matter to people. And so he had to stay in town rather than leave. He had to sacrifice his external dream to get that internal goal and make that internal goal possible. All right, so this is what we know so far. Characters have external goals and internal goals. They have motivation, which is their why. So now let's talk about the conflict, because it's great that you have goals and it's great that you're motivated for them. That's real life, right? You're in college or you are a writer and your goal is to write. You're motivated for your own individual reasons. But unlike real life, or maybe mirroring real life, there's always a conflict. Often the hero's external and internal goals are in conflict. With the previous example, George's external goal is to leave town, but his internal goals of having a meaningful life required that he stay in Bedford Falls. So external, leave town. Internal, stay where he's needed. The internal, making a difference, is his ultimate goal. And sometimes your character, like George Bailey, doesn't know his goal until he fails or something in the external plot causes him to fail and he realizes what he really wants. So in this example, the goals are in conflict, and that is often the case. Conflict tends to be internal, and I know I write action, a lot of action scenes, and I write suspense, and a lot of that follows a very fast-paced external plot. But the conflict that people stick around for is internal. Adding external problems only adds drama if the obstacles are something the protagonist must confront to overcome their particular issue. For example, if I see a crime committed and it doesn't pertain to me, I make my report to the police and go home. However, if I see a crime committed and I know the victim, the perpetrator, or the event, that interferes some way with my goal, I must confront the obstacle. An example of this, when I was little, my dad had a major car accident, and my mom was working at a club in the evenings as a waitress to make money, and there was a murder out in the parking lot. She didn't see a thing, but when the police took everybody who worked there and started asking them questions, one of the cops told her, don't change your story. The guy who was killed was probably mafia related. And, this death that happened in the parking lot is what they do to people who get in their way. Now, she hadn't seen it. It didn't really impact her until they said, hey, this could impact your family. These people tend to kill witnesses. Now she has personal motivation to either participate or not participate. Everything that the protagonist faces arises from the problems she needs to solve, both internally and externally. So if my mother was working to feed and take care of her kids, and had she seen something, which she didn't, but had she seen something, testifying now becomes very personal because she could lose the thing that matters most, which is her kids, by dealing with this external element of testifying in court. Okay, so there's three different things we have going on as far as assignments today. The first part is critical reading. Read Guests of a Nation by Frank O'Connor. If you're in my online class, that will be in the course content shortly. And I want you to figure out the goals, both internal and external, the goals, motivations, and conflicts for one of these characters. The Englishman, which is the big Englishman, Belcher, Little Hawkins, the locals, which would be the narrator or noble, and then Jeremiah Donovan, who doesn't really fit into either of those groups. All right, so the second prompt has to do with our class character. And for those of you who are not in the online class, you could have brainstormed your own character, but I'm going to review what we know about Myra Ruiz. So that's the character that we brainstormed in our course. Myra is 22. She is a shapeshifter. Her family doesn't know. She has a sibling who does find out. There's all kinds of fun details about her. So physically, she has dark curly hair, a gap in her front teeth. She likes to wear bright colors but no heels, brown eyes, approximately 5'4". I'm informed that that is not short. She loves the color purple, likes to wear long earrings, and hates chocolate. The hates chocolate thing ties to the fact that she shapeshifts into a hairless cat. If you've never seen a hairless cat, you should definitely Google a picture of that. Her desire is to accept her shapeshifter self. There's a curse on her family, and the only way to defeat it is as a cat. So you can see how that shapeshifting is impacting her life. She doesn't like being a cat. Since she is only 22, she doesn't have a career yet. She hates the rain. Her job is a dog walker. She's trying to get a degree in veterinary medicine. She sometimes has scratches from, as a human form, from being a shapeshifting into a cat and getting into fights. There's inconsistency. I can't remember if the shapeshifting depends on time of day a little bit like Shrek or not. I don't know if we got a definitive answer on that. Some complications could be being stuck as a cat, being scared easily like a cat, annoying younger sibling, being tired a lot because she's nocturnal. She hisses at strangers. She has a lot of allergic problems. The obstacles could be people who hate cats, people who hunt shapeshifters, and we're going to further develop her later today. So that's what the second part of the prompt is brainstorming. For your character, what are their goals, internal and external? What is their why? And how are these in conflict, which is what we're going to do for Myra here shortly. And then for writing prompt, for those of you who are in my online class, for your journals for today, using the class character that we finish working on today, write a short fiction scene with Myra as the protagonist. What is her external goal? What is her internal goal? And why does she want them? And then how does this create conflict? And that conflict is what you're going to demonstrate in the scene as you're writing it, is that conflict between her external goal and her internal goal, so that, like George Bailey, we can see that she may have to sacrifice one for the other. Okay, that is it for today. I appreciate your time. Meet me in the chat and we'll start developing Myra's conflicts.